Hi, the SI meteorologist Paul Dorian here on Wednesday, January 4th. I thought I'd talk a few minutes about the potential for a major shift in the temperature pattern that we've experienced here in the eastern U.S. We've, of course, been well above normal for November and December, but there's signs, increasing signs, that by about the middle of January, the middle of the month, we may flip to colder than normal, perhaps for the second half of January on into February. For the last few weeks, we've talked about some changes going on in the atmosphere all the way from the North Pole down to the Pacific Ocean, including a stratospheric warming event over the North Pole and some changes going on over the Pacific in terms of the La Nina that has occurred over the past several months. Let's update all that activity and see how it may play a role in a potential temperature pattern flip here in the eastern U.S. What we have here is an index called the SOI, Southern Oscillation Index, that is, in this case, kept by the Australian government. And it shows the relative strength of the La Nina going down dramatically. The higher the number here, the stronger the La Nina. And you can see since Christmas time, just in the last week or two, the SOI has dropped dramatically. And this can have an important impact on overall global weather conditions. We've seen in the past that sometimes when La Nina weakens, it has an effect and perhaps even increases the chances of colder air coming into the northeastern part of the U.S. because a strong La Nina generally generates a strong high-pressure ridge in the southeastern U.S., which often keeps the mid-Atlantic warmer than normal. So this is one thing that's going on right now over the Pacific Ocean, perhaps a significant weakening of the La Nina that has been existing there for the last several months. Now, another area that we focused on over the last few weeks has been the North Pole region, where stratospheric warming has occurred, and that often leads to a temperature pattern flip. And we'll talk about one historic temperature pattern flip that occurred in the middle part of the 1980s. Well, what we see here is a map of the temperature pattern in the highest part of the atmosphere, about 10 millibars, which is in the stratosphere, over the North Pole, really from the North Pole down to 65 degrees north here. So the very high latitudes, this has been the temperature trend over the last week or two. Again, a dramatic rise here over the North Pole in the highest part of the atmosphere, the stratosphere. Temperatures have jumped dramatically here. And again, in the past, in several instances in the past, a dramatic stratospheric warming event or a sudden stratospheric warming event over the North Pole has often led to blocking conditions to develop over the Arctic, which in turn led to much colder weather here in the central and eastern part of the U.S. several weeks later. We've talked about how this all takes place over a several-week time frame, and this has begun a few weeks ago, and there's potential for a temperature pattern flip about the middle part of January from the stratospheric warming, in addition to what's going on in the Pacific Ocean. Another way to look at what's going on over the North Pole region is from the GFS model, the Global Forecast System. This is the temperature analysis, again, in the stratosphere, about 10 millibars, right over the North Pole. The North Pole is situated right in this region right here, and there's typically a polar vortex or a cold polar vortex, and it's displaced a little bit right off of the North Pole region with some warming just on the other side of the pole. The U.S. is down in this region right here. Now let's take a look 5 days from now. This is the forecast from the GFS model for 5 days from now, and it flips from this to this. So really what happens is we go from here, and this whole thing kind of wraps around again, and 5 days from now we have quite a dramatic warming event occurring on the other side of the pole, on the Asian side of the pole. Now 5 days later, or 10 days from the current situation, it moves right over the North Pole region, and this is a stratospheric warming event that is even more impressive than what we've had over the last couple of weeks. And this, again, is a forecast from the GFS model for 10 days from now. So what we have here is a potential for another stratospheric warming event to occur in about 10 days, and that could set off a chain of events that could lead to a temperature pattern flip here in the eastern part of the U.S. by the middle part of January. Well, just how dramatic can a temperature pattern flip be? Well, this is an example of a stratospheric warming event. We've talked about this in our stratospheric warming video that's on the Meteorology 101 section of the website. This is quite an amazing case from December 1984, where it was much above normal here in the eastern part of the U.S. The reds and oranges and yellows here represent above normal. It's colder than normal out over the northwestern part of the country. But in our part of the country, December of 1984 was a very mild month. And then a stratospheric warming event occurred. And here's what happened in January. The pattern basically flipped. Here we have much colder than normal throughout the eastern half of the country. And it was quite a dramatic change from December 1984 to January of 1985. That potential exists here for the eastern part of the U.S. from about the middle part of the month on. So we'll continue to monitor this situation for a potential temperature pattern flip around the middle of the month of January. That's it for now on the SI Meteorologist, Paul Dorian.